Hi, Dr. Rob. Glad you're here with us tonight.
Thanks, Tammy. It's been a busy day. How about you?
Likewise.
Yeah. We have lots of work that we're doing behind the scenes to get treatment programs open, to start some intensives that I plan on doing. For those of you who have not been around or sort of joining us, this platform is our opportunity to give away everything that we know for free. And what allows us to do that is we will very quickly be opening some treatment programs and treatment environments. And for those of you who end up going to treatment, we'll probably end up paying for everybody else to get help for free. And as much as we are able to do these webinars and this whole series that we're doing, we're going to keep doing it until we drop, because this seems to be, I want to tell you something, Tammy. I don't know how often you heard this, but I was talking to a therapist today. And of course, I always love hearing these words, but she said that we are groundbreaking because we're offering help for people that might never be able to find it, never be able to afford it, never understand it, or be too fearful to ask about it. And we're just here helping. And I reminded her, which I will remind you guys, which I'm really, oh, sorry about the t-shirt, really excited. It's a bacon thing. I'm really excited about, when I was growing up and I wanted help, if I wanted to talk to Dr. Carnes or Dr. Bradshaw or any of those really famous, amazing people, I had to go to their treatment centers or some kind of seminar. And you guys get to talk to experts here free. And I just think that is the best gift that we can give you, is to get your questions answered, point you in the right direction, and not charge you anything. And those of you who trust us enough and have the resources will come see us for help. And I'm riding on that belief system. So
I'm going to chime in on that because, we answer requests for help from all over the world, and these resources, like the live webinars, you and drop-in groups, if you can on your time zone connect, great. But there's so many resources like the webinars that are recorded or the podcast where you can listen and watch those at any time of the day or night. You're having free. And you're having, invasive thoughts or whatever. Well, great. Listen to a podcast. I had one person that commented that they were preventing relapse by, they go listen to another podcast. I said, great, whatever helps in that moment.
So we're here to answer questions. And for those of you who show up every Monday night, I answer just very general questions on sex addiction, recovery for couples, infidelity, and we'll also talk about chemsex and co-occurring drug and sex addiction for those people who have those issues. And why don't we get started?
Okay, first question is from a female. My husband is here with me tonight, and we are watching the webinar together.
Hi, husband.
This is his question. I'm in my mid-30s in recovery from SA for 346 days. What are some effective techniques to break the cycle of negative thoughts and self-hatred? It's pretty much been my go-to for my whole life.
I'll say three things. How about one from a recovery perspective, meaning what we say in treatment programs is do esteemable things and you will gain self-esteem. So if you are sponsoring people, if you're helping people, if you started a group, if you're volunteering, if you're offering your home for a potluck for your group, these are the things that make you feel good about yourself, is worrying and focusing less on you and focusing more on other people that you can give things to, because the more you give, the better you're going to feel about yourself. So that's the program answer. I think a sort of therapy answer might, because I'm going to give three versions of this answer, right? And I'm working on the lighting here. A therapy answer might be something more like, how are you taking care of yourself? Because a lot of people in recovery miss the boat when it comes to having fun. They focus on meetings and therapy and journaling and meditate, and boy, are those things important. But you also have to go to the movies. You also have to join a team. You also have to paint or draw or sing or whatever makes you happy. And it cannot only be, for your wife, misery because you caused misery. You have to be able to learn how to enjoy your life without all that sexual craziness. And I find that in my opinion, most sex and love addicts, and I think addicts in general, relapse because they're not doing enough to make themselves enjoy their lives. They're too much in how horrible they are and the terrible things they've done, and which all may be true, but that still doesn't mean you're a bad person and don't get to enjoy your life. And let me just give you the third. Well, I just canceled my lighting, so the hell with it. And the third reason is, Tammy's enjoying this because I want you guys to know we've been doing this for 4 months or something, and I still have not got the lighting right, but that's okay. Just enjoy yourself, Tammy. And the third thing, which I think is equally as important, is from a psychological point of view, what you describe, other people talk about as depression. Feelings of a chronic, constant feeling of I'm not even on the first floor. I'm always in the basement trying to just get to the first floor. Every day I feel badly about myself, and not just related to my behavior, but always in general. That can really point to chronic depression. And I can tell you, as someone who's on medication for chronic depression, it didn't stop me from my addiction, but boy, did it make me feel better about myself, because I didn't realize that part of what my addiction was doing was allowing me to tolerate a brain dysfunction that was depression. And when I got the addiction solved, and I was still struggling with some sadness, and boy, did addressing the depression help. But to your credit, by the way, I just want to say, like, you can't figure any of this out when you're acting out actively, because, your 340 whatever days are so important, because now you can sit back and say, I've been acting like a decent, loving person for 300 and whatever days, and why do I feel this way if I'm not doing things that should make me feel bad about myself? And I think you're in a much better place to look at this on a very broad way. And so I would look at all three of those areas. Are you being loving enough to yourself? Are you having enough fun and enjoying your recovery? Are you turning to people about depression and anxiety and other mood disorders that often pop up and become clearer when the acting out stops?
Next question. My SA husband is often wandering around the house in a zombie-like state. I believe he is working on his recovery, but it is difficult to interact with him. Does this get better after time?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. So I don't know exactly how to interpret that. Tammy, do you have an idea about that?
It sounds like he's very disengaged from any kind of presence. So I hear her saying, I believe he's working on his recovery. I think I'd like to know more about what specifically he's doing to work on his recovery, so that he's starting to make positive attachments and connect with other people, including you, but other people as well. So
I think I want to say that you have to understand that sex addiction in particular is a disorder of dissociation. Those of us, if you look underneath what the sexual acting out is for many of us, it's about trauma and using intensity of fantasy to kind of space out. So, hey, Tammy, can you take the room for just a minute? They're delivering my food, and I have a sick...
Okay, yes. Okay, so I'm going to continue on this vein of thought, because if he's completely, yes, addiction is about dissociating and everything else. So it's starting to look for other ways to connect. So my question was, is he going to 12-step meetings? Is he doing the drop-in groups? What is he doing to connect with other people? Because if that helps bring him back to the non-zombie-like state, that would make a difference. I'm a little questioning about exactly what he's doing for his recovery, because if it's just, I'm just not acting out, that's different. That's like, I call it like the white knuckle, I'm not acting out, but I haven't really changed anything, and I still don't know how to interact or be in society. So I see you've added on, he's attending multiple group meetings, and I think he's overwhelmed, but overall I think it's helping him. He has a lot of homework and it's getting getting the things confused. Okay, so that's really helpful, and I can totally understand being very confused and overwhelmed. If you, like, for my experience, it was like I did things this way and they were maladaptive and they didn't really work and all of that, but that was the way I knew how to do it. So now somebody is telling me that there's a different way, and it's like, you got to do all of this completely differently. The other thing is, which was really a struggle for me, was I didn't know how to handle emotions or connections or anything else. I had a lot of fear around that. And so learning to incrementally engage with people, was challenging. But I think a lot of what Dr. Rob said just a few minutes ago is like, I hear him doing some program things. What's he doing for fun? Like, if you go do something fun together, or he does something fun, does he come out of the zombie-like state? So I think, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say again about dissociation is that, we have issues that drive us to sexually act out. We act out over intolerable feelings and experiences that often go back to the past. And so just because we stop the behavior and get support doesn't mean we're not still struggling with a whole bunch of internal messages and feelings and stuff that's overwhelming. In fact, maybe more so because now we don't have the behavior to escape into. And so it could just be also underlying issues that some therapy would be helpful for, because now that the acting out has stopped, it doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, there's stuff underneath that drives it. And I'll give you an example just for me. Like I love spacing out. It's one of my favorite things to do. I can be home and not hear anyone or anything. And, sometimes I have to be reminded that it's dinner time and dinner's ready, and because I would rather stay on that computer. And it's not because I don't care about my family or I don't want to be engaged. It's just this is so comforting for me. This is such a controlled space. I know what I'm doing. I know, I'm not talking about porn. I could just be shopping or working, but at least I'm in somewhere where I feel the intensity, I'm connected, and I have control. But going out with that family and chatting and just being, well, that's a whole different thing. So it may just be he's reached a stage where more work is needed.
Yeah, and even you mentioned uncomfortable feelings and going back to the past. An uncomfortable feeling for me was any feeling, whether it was good or bad. I didn't know how to handle any of those because I was so used to numbing out. So, my range of ability to handle any kind of emotion was very, very tiny. So it would be a safe place for me to zombie out and not have to deal with that until I had tools that would be able to help me do that. So. Okay, next question. I would like to know the difference between healthy masturbation and addictive masturbation, specifically the mind frame of addictive masturbation and fantasy. My porn addicted, in denial, and not watching porn for about a year now husband says he can't imagine going 2 weeks without having an orgasm, and he would prefer hand stimulation from me than sex. Thoughts?
That's a lot of question.
Yeah.
Do you think you could narrow that down? Question. Tammy, by the way, is my kind of like when you're driving, you have a navigator. Tammy is navigating. So you navigate that into a question that.
Well, a couple of things. I think a healthy masturbation versus addictive masturbation.
Okay.
Let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about the next piece.
Okay. So I think I talked about this recently, but I think masturbation is if you're over 19 or 20, when your hormones aren't raging. It's really, well, I don't even know how to say this. The reason I'm hesitating is because in the moment, masturbation is just masturbation, and it doesn't look, it's hard to tell. I guess the idea of losing myself to porn for hours and hours and hours would be a problem. So if I were looking at something for 10 or 15 minutes and I brought myself to some kind of orgasm and I was doing that occasionally and it didn't feel particularly driven and I could say yes or no and it wasn't causing consequences and nobody objected and I still had a healthy sex life and I still had a healthy intimacy life. In other words, if what I was doing sexually was not interfering with my goals, my beliefs, my feelings about myself, it's probably not compulsive. If it's happening when I don't want it to happen, if I think it's interfering with parts of my life, like dating or relationships or school, and I can't seem to put it aside or stop it, if I find myself very, very anxious before and very, very relieved after, in other words, I'm looking forward to it as a source of not just pleasure, but relief, there might be other ways to look at it than it simply being about the occasional need to relieve your body's desire to be sexual. Let me say one more thing. Tammy, why don't you throw something in there? I mean, there's so many things to say about this topic. I'm not even sure where to start.
Well, I would invite people to, because you did a great job on last week's webinar of talking about like dating yourself and things like that. So I would invite you to watch that webinar that was posted about this particular topic. I can just say in brief to cover that, sorry to interrupt, but that, you wouldn't invite someone out on a date and have sex with them in your bathroom and then ask them to leave. So why would you go and have sex with yourself for 3 minutes and have it be over? If you want to masturbate and you have questions about whether it's compulsive or not, take some time. Take yourself to dinner, go to a movie, give yourself a bath, make it a part of a nurturing experience. And here's another way to think about it. It's for most of us, not all of us, but for most of us, compulsive masturbation without porn, especially the men that I work with, is kind of difficult. Without the porn, it becomes less and less and less interesting. So one of the fastest ways to get out of compulsive use of masturbation is to stop all porn and see what happens. For most of us, it becomes much more occasional, much less driven, because we don't have all those images constantly driving the stimulation. And by the way, they say in AA, the great way to find out if you have a problem with alcohol or not is simply take 30 days and stop. And I would say the same thing to you. Take 30 days and don't masturbate and see whether that's something that's desperate
or something that just you just kind of miss a little bit?
Okay, so then the next component of this is her husband can't imagine going 2 weeks without an orgasm. And here's the thing I think is probably the biggest part of the question is he would prefer my hand stimulation to sex. So that feels like it's more distanced than.
Well, I'm not going to judge what it is.
I'm not judging either. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying you are. Let's get back to him. I can't judge or say I don't know him, so I don't know what it means to him. And maybe the physical stimulation is so much more gratifying to him than vaginal entry that's what he enjoys. And so what? As long as he can find something that you enjoy, it isn't what right or wrong. It's that you can pleasure each other and you can enjoy each other. And quite honestly, I worked with a gentleman for many years who was never able to penetrate his wife. He would lose his erection. He had a lot of trauma, but they could masturbate together. They could be sexual in a whole variety of ways, but intercourse wasn't something they could do. So, we worked on it long and hard. Well, that's not the right way to say it. We worked on it diligently, and, it really became clear that he at 45 years old, he wasn't going to start having penetrative sex. So the question I would ask is he looking me in the eye when I'm touching him? Is he engaged with me? Is he touching me? Is he off in fantasy somewhere and wants me to just masturbate him? Or is it a part of an exchange of our connection? Because I could connect in a loving sexual way with or without penetration. I might never be able to get an erection and still connect deeply, intimately, and sexually. So I think it depends on where he's at when he does this, and if you do get the kind of sexuality that you enjoy as well, or whether it's his way or the highway.
Great answer. That's very helpful. I'm dealing with internalized homophobia that I didn't really realize until recently. I'm also dealing with sex addiction. Do you have any advice for dealing with these things simultaneously? It just bothers me that I didn't realize that underlined my essay until recently.
Well, I would say we are where we are when we're there, and you get to the answers when you're ready, and you can say, well, I wish I'd known that before, but if you were in a place where you could have known that before, you would have. So I would say give yourself a break. I did write a book on this topic. It's probably one of the books I'm best known for. It's a book called Cruise Control, Understanding Sex Addiction in Gay Men. And one of the reasons I wrote it is because gay men have a history of having a lot of sex, but also having a lot of casual sex, a lot of anonymous sex, a lot of sex that would be carried out differently in the heterosexual community. In other words, gay men have different norms for healthy sexuality than heterosexuals do around healthy sexuality. And it's not because we're gay, it's because we're men, and we're men with each other, and that's how men with each other treat sexuality more frequently, more casually. That's the way gay life is for men. The question is, how do you look at yourself as possibly having a problem with too much sex when you live in a community that has so much more sex than let's say the heterosexual community? Being a gay male sex actor is kind of like being an alcoholic in a bar. Everybody's drinking, so who's the healthy drinker? Who's the unhealthy? It's hard to tell. So I would suggest, and I don't recommend my books all the time, but in this case, read Cruise Control. It really does a good job. There's a whole chapter on homophobia. There's a chapter on HIV. There's a chapter on meth. There's a chapter on trauma. And most of all, there's a lot of ways of looking at what healthy sexuality is for a gay man other than crawling in and out of bushes in the dark. And I think that is stuff that is well learned, especially if you're a younger gay man, to see a little bit of our history and also how you can find healthy sexuality for yourself. I can tell you really quickly, it's all about boundaries and structure. It's about making commitments that you stick to. I'm going to get to know, it doesn't matter that you're gay and that gay men tend to be more sexual and that you might meet a man who wants to have sex on the first date. What matters is where you're at with that and how you feel about that and the boundary that you set and what your values and what your morals and what your beliefs. I promise you, you can find gay men who have never had sex with anyone and were waiting until they're 25 and get married. There are such men. And I know gay men have had sex with every friend they've ever met, but when they settle down with someone, that's it, and they're monogamous. We're just all across the board. But the more you can learn and the more you can share about this, the better. And thank you for being here, because you're talking about homophobia. It gives us a space to talk about it here.
Okay, next one. From a female, I'm an essay in good recovery on 1 to 4 telephone meetings, video meetings a day, received a good amount of trauma therapy, and I don't even feel the same pressure to act out and can reason through it when it surfaces. I understand from Dr. Rob that it will be a year to a year and a half before my spouse trusts me. But even before the essay surfaced, he didn't trust me and viewed me not as a person that I was, but as someone not worthy of trust based on nothing that I was doing. Then it didn't affect me as much because I was stronger, more confident, but now it feels insurmountable and is making it very difficult, uphill battle against my essay even harder. Is there some way that I can help him see this and not harm him, my recovery while redeveloping his trust, or rather developing it for the first time?
This is a great question, and it's a question that I hear from both genders. And it's kind of like this. When you're an active addict, when I was an active addict, I was kind of needless and wantless of the people in my life because I didn't ask them for attention. I didn't ask them for validation. I didn't ask them for support. I didn't ask anyone for anything because I got all my needs met through a sexualized experience. But when I got sober, when I stopped doing all of that, when I started becoming aware that I had needs and that I was a worthwhile person, that it was okay for me to get those needs met by asking people, then I had to go through the struggle and the fear of starting to ask people what I wanted from them. And this is particularly hard when you're talking to a husband or a wife that you have betrayed. Because in my mind, if it's only been a couple of months, they're probably going to say something to you like, you want something from me? After what you did to my life and my family and our children, forget it. I don't have anything to give you. So in the beginning, it may be that you're not going to get it from them. Doesn't mean you can't let them know. Like I might say, I really love it if you'd listen to this more, talk to me more about that more, understand this. They may or may not be able to, but it's important for you to know that you have the need and that it's valid. Now, you may get those needs met by a sponsor, by a therapist, by someone else at a 12-step program. One of the other things I say in here is that we can't expect to turn to the person we betrayed a couple of months after betraying them and say, woo, woo, give me some cheers for my recovery, because they're saying, why should I cheer for something you should have done right in the first place, as far as they're concerned. So but we need the cheers, and we need them from therapists and people in our groups and all those people you're connecting with. I think the best thing you can do is, in a very simple and non-demanding way, on a fairly regular basis, say, I just want you to know I'm becoming, as I grow and get more sober, I'm becoming more aware of my needs in this relationship. And here's something I'd like to talk about us working on, and then see what happens. You'll know when he's ready to talk about it or she's ready to talk about it. This is not something you can avoid. This is what you can expect. The more sober you are, the more you're going to want and need, because you're not acting it out. If you don't get those needs met, you're more likely to go act out. So it's essential that you do get those needs met, but your husband or wife may not, at least in the short term, be the person who can do that. And here's a clue. I would want my husband or wife to say to me, you know what? I get that you need that, and I believe that you need that, and I want you to have that, but I can't give it to you right now. Great. At least they heard me, and they're angry, but they're thinking about it. And that's good enough at the beginning. So I think you're on the right track. I know it because you're questioning how you can be happier. And that is very different than questioning how you can be. Most people come on here and they're saying, I'm so miserable. How can I not be miserable? You're actually saying, I'd like to be happy. And that tells me you're on the right track.
Yeah, and I was keying in a little bit on the, he didn't trust me even when I wasn't doing things that were not worthy of trust. But I also thought about if you weren't, like Dr. Rob just said, if you didn't need him, you were taking care of all your needs, there's not that point of connection. There wasn't trust building back then for an underlying trust that was eventually betrayed. I think you're at the building that foundation, for right now.
And Tammy, how long did she say that she had been sober? Or?
It just says I'm in good recovery. It doesn't say exactly.
This is a process.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you are coming in touch with what you want more of. And I think eventually, I hope that your spouse will love it too. But just like any of us, we may not get what we want when we want it. And that doesn't mean anything. She
adds, he just wants him not to make it worse. So any thoughts on what you can say or do to...
Don't make it worse.
Yeah. I think being honest with sharing where you're at.
I would listen to him. He knows exactly what he needs. He wants you to not hurt him anymore.
Okay. So the next one, in terms of love addiction, do you believe that withdrawal is a real experience? What does it entail? I'm a sex and love addict, and it's been almost 5 months, and I still find myself going all day thinking about a guy that I didn't even have a relationship with when I go to meetings. I have a sponsor and participate in a lot of recovery activities. I just want the fantasizing to stop. This is from a female.
Okay. So first of all, if you are somewhere between 15 and death and you're single and you're human, it's not unusual to be thinking, I'd like that person, I like this person, so you got to give yourself a little bit of a break. Your withdrawal symptoms from sex and love addiction feel like emptiness, loneliness, longing, lonely, just this incredible feeling of isolation, even when you're around people. And it has to do with having used sexual connection and the brain chemistry that comes along with that to soothe ourselves for so long that eventually, that just healthy relationships don't really make it. So I'm sorry, I want to get to the heart of this question. So is withdrawal a real experience? Yes. But I want to say something a little bit about sex, love, addiction in general. So to me, sex addiction is using other people as objects to make me feel better, using other people's objects for sex to make me feel better. So if you want me, you desire me, if I can get you to be sexual with me or think that I'm hot or you want to be with me, then I'm powerful, important, and special. I don't really care about you, but the fact that you were willing to have sex with me makes me feel powerful, special, and important. Love addiction is only one step up from that. It's not objectifying someone's butt and someone's arms and someone's legs, but it's and how they're going to make you feel when they desire you. It's about objectifying someone and saying, oh, that person is going to always make me feel loved. They're the one, it's like, they're so nice, they're so sweet, and it's kind of throwing Christmas lights on someone and turning them into something that they may or may not be simply because you need them to be that. And I think going from objectifying body parts to objectifying people as love object is actually an advanced process. In other words, if sex addiction is high school, then love addiction is college. And what I want you to do is go to graduate school, which is healthy relationships and intimacy. So I do think love addiction is a step along the way. And I also think that withdrawal feels like longing, loneliness, emptiness. But here's the thing, I just want to say this, you don't have to be lonely and you don't have to be empty, and you could be completely fulfilled by not having romantic and sexual relationships and really investing in the community of people who are healing in meetings, in 12-step groups, in therapy. I mean, it's by investing in those relationships where you will feel fulfilled. I'll tell you one little secret about me. I wanted to be married. I've wanted to be married since I was born. And when I really got into recovery, I don't know if Tammy knows this, but I really, really got into recovery, like put love addiction aside, because I'd gotten to that. I'd put down sex addiction, I'd gotten to love addiction, and that wasn't working for me. And I said, I'm going to start really healthy dating. I mean, really, really clean, healthy. I was single, I'm sorry to tell you this, I was single for 9 years. I was single for 9 years because I wasn't ready. It wasn't the right, I just couldn't, but I'll tell you what, I've been married now for 18. And I don't think a number matters. I think what matters is the quality of our relationships. I've been happily and deeply enjoying my marriage for 18 years. And I don't regret that 9 years, but boy, was I lonely and miserable. And they told me, all these therapy people, they told me, don't date, discover yourself. Don't go looking for someone. They'll come to you when you're ready. I don't believe that. I wanted to go out and find someone, and I was going to gig them like a frog. If you don't know what gigging frogs is, you can look that up. But I wanted to go get that person. Now, with that attitude, it took me 9 years, but I did eventually find someone that I want, So I'm not saying don't look, but understand that dating is a process, recovery is a process. You may not know the difference between love addiction and actually liking someone for a little while until you start to look at the behaviors you're engaging in toward each other. So.
And I think I'm going to go back to what you started off with early on of engage in things where you're outside of yourself. Go do something where you're of service to somebody else. Because if you're doing things, go for a hike, go do things that are meaningful to you that are different than just the stuff between my ears. That if I'm outside of myself, I'm not in here. Okay, next one. I'm currently in recovery after 7 years of sobriety. I began masturbating to porn after my partner of 3 years sent me a topless pictures of herself. I continued masturbating several times each week for about 9 months until I revealed this to her. She did not catch me and had no idea until I told her. We have a long distance relationship, seeing each other for a month or more at a time every 3 to 4 months. I did not masturbate at all when we were together. We are currently not in the same city, and I have been working on myself and my recovery. She has told me that she loves me more than ever and can see the work that I'm doing, but she has no sexual desire. This is a complete change from the past when we had a very active sex life, and she would often tell me how much she wanted to be with me sexually. Any thoughts or suggestions?
I think you need to talk to her. I mean, something happened. And it sounds like from your question, you're equating what happened. You're putting together what happened, something to do with you're objectifying her sending the pictures. And now, it may be something as simple as she's worried that, listen, if I sent you some pictures and you ended up acting out for 3 months, I think when you came back to me for sex, I'd be like, well, I don't know, because I don't want to set you off again. So I can imagine on one level, she really cares about you. She's backing off to protect you or make sure, you told her you got triggered by her. So she may not know how this all works. So she may think, well, in my loving of him, I'm just going to pull back. But I don't know what it means. It may also mean that she has issues from her past around being objectified, and she thought you loved her for her, and now she finds out you're masturbating to her body, and she didn't like that. So this is a perfect opportunity to grow intimacy, because intimacy is all about taking risks and being known, and not a whole lot about having sex. Intimacy is about, I really care about you, and I've noticed that you've been distanced, and I wonder why, and it really makes me feel this. That's intimate, because you have revealed yourself to her and made yourself vulnerable. How she responds, that's up to, and that will tell you a lot about the relationship. I think you're in a difficult set of circumstances, by the way, because any person who's, under 40 and it wants to have a regular sex life. I say under 40 because we slow down a little bit on sex when we get older. But anyone who's under 40 who wants to have a really regular sex life and is having regular sex life, and all of a sudden their partner's gone for 3 months, especially, that's hard. And then they're back and then they're gone. That's difficult for anybody. So I would certainly give yourself the grace to understand that you're in difficult circumstances. And many of us, certainly I do, have a lot of issues with abandonment. That's just what I grew up with. And so the close loving and then the person being gone, intellectually, I know why. It's because we're doing this, but emotionally, it's really hard on me. And I would suggest, you also take a look at how this flow is affecting you and your recovery and your sense of yourself. But you got to talk to each other. You got to get real about this stuff. Otherwise, you're not going to have the answers. But she knows why. I don't know why she's changed her tune, but she does. And I'm sure she'll tell you if you ask her.
Next one. After years of being lied to about all manner of things he has hid from me, I have finally decided to divorce my SA. While he was doing a recovery program, he is still lying to me and using manipulation tactics of all kinds. He is raging, literally narcissist. I think he is stunned that I am really going to leave our 40-year marriage. The trauma bond has kept me stuck, and I'm stuck in fight or flight. Needless to say, I'm chronically sick from the traumas. At this point, I'd rather live in a shelter than be lied to, abused, demeaned on a regular basis. He rejects the notion of his cycle of violence, which we have lived forever. I am ashamed that I have stayed so long. He claims he does not have an intimacy disorder, nor does he admit he fantasizes about sex and porn. Crazy making. This astounds me because he is the poster child for SA. His addiction runs deep. Do narcissists believe their own lies, or is every single lie calculated?
A couple of things. Someone mentioned podcasts. So I did a podcast on narcissism. The podcast is called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And it's definitely worth checking if you want to listen to that particular discussion on narcissism. I think I also did a podcast on cruise control for whoever the gay person is in the room. And we try to cover topics that are pertinent to you guys. And again, podcasts are free. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. As far as narcissism is concerned, every addict who's active in their addiction is narcissistic by nature. So if I am actively using heroin, I might decide to take my kid's college fund and spend it on more heroin because I don't care about my kid's college fund in that moment. I care about getting the heroin. But you take that same person and really get them sober, and I believe a healthy person, even with narcissistic wounding, will come back and apologize, own that stuff, and work 3 jobs to pay that money back. In other words, we look very narcissistic when we're active in our addiction because addiction is a narcissistic disorder. But when we pull back and we're in our recovery, we can be very grace-based and very ethical and very caring, not so empathic. I think we still struggle with that, but at least very aware. And so it disturbs me deeply that you live with someone who is unaware of your pain and seems unwilling to respond to it. And I think that when someone says they're in recovery and they're working on recovery, that doesn't just mean they're not acting out or they're a hero at meetings. It also means that they treat you with respect and dignity, that they're honest with you. Recovery is a pervasive issue. It isn't just how I act sexually. That would just be, I guess, just not having sex. Recovery is about becoming a better person, about being accountable, about being honest, about looking at myself and understanding how I can improve my relationships. And by the way, we addicts, we do this for selfish reasons. If we have better relationships and we have healthier lives, we're less likely to go back to drinking, using, and having sex. So we actually are required, if we want to heal for the long term, to be better people and to be kinder to those around us. What that would mean for me, if you describe someone who's sort of the hero of SA meetings in your neighborhood, he should be also the hero of your marriage. And if he's not the hero of your marriage, then how could he possibly be a hero of an SA meeting unless, as you say, he's really good at getting everyone to think he's amazing, but when it comes down to it in an intimate relationship, he's not present or not able to give or not empathic or worse. I can't tell you what to do, but I do believe this. Nobody walks out of a 40-year relationship unless they are in a lot of pain. Nobody walks out of all those years of connection and churches and vacations and everything you've been through. We are so deeply connected as couples that most of us will stay together. If you feel, look, I'll say one more thing to you. I don't know about you, but I'm very aware as I get older, I only have so much time left. And I want to be happy. I want to be giving. I want to be the best person I can be. And I want to be with people who also reflect those values in whatever 20, 30 years I have left, maybe less. So I would ask yourself at your age, what are your values? What is important to you? And how do you want to live your life? And certainly you two could live in separate rooms and you could have your own friends and he can have his friends and, or you may need to move on. I can't tell you that, but I will tell you this. Recovery doesn't look anything like the husband you described.
Okay, next question. As you mentioned in Out of the Doghouse, that's another one of your books, there are numerous things that can trigger a wounded spouse. Saying, I'm sorry doesn't help. Is there anything that can help to validate the anger or rage? Yeah,
validate their anger and rage. That's the best thing to do. So you see that unhappy look on your partner's face and you know what's coming. It's going to be, you were 10 minutes late and blah, 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 and I can't believe it. And you're doing this to me again, because we all know that's going to happen. But it's our response that matters. It's when we don't say, oh God, you're angry at me again. And I was just sitting in traffic and what's the big deal? The way we help our partners understand that we respect their anger is by saying, hey, I know you're going to be angry at me tonight and it's okay. I didn't act out, but I was 10 minutes late and that probably reminded you. So by thinking through how our actions and our behaviors are now affecting this person, knowing what they know, by anticipating problems, and always being non-defensive. And understanding that, you read the book, it could take a year or more to get anything looking like forgiveness. I think the only way to restore trust in a relationship is through right behavior. It isn't anything you say, it's everything about what you do. She shouldn't or he shouldn't trust you anyway. I'm not trustable for many years in what I said. When I was an active addict, if my mouth was moving, I was lying. But was I on time? Did I bring home the groceries, Weiss? Did I get ready for dinner? Did I make sure that the kids were picked up? Or am I following through my commitments? Am I showing up for my relationship? I will say this to those of your partners, and I do write about this a lot Out of the Doghouse. Some of you, and I completely understand this, expect us to be better people because we have 4 months of sobriety. And I got to tell you that we have lifelong patterns, most of us, of lying, keeping secrets, living a double life, being narcissistically inclined, not thinking about others. And just because some crisis stops our behavior and we start to learn about a different way of living may mean that we can stop sexually acting out, but it doesn't necessarily mean we know how to be a good person or a kind person or a loving person. Those are personality characteristics that if we can become aware of them and work on them through recovery, that's a really good thing. But if we can't, if we're unable to see ourselves as we are, it's a difficult place for a spouse to be, because our stopping the behavior isn't enough. You want us to be kind. You want us to be nurturing. You want us to be good listeners. You want us to show up. And I think most of us would like to do that for you. It's just that many of us don't know how at the beginning. And we're so used to saying, leave us alone, that it's a long way from give me a break, leave me alone tonight, to no, I want to be included in the family. I want to participate. I want to be a part of. That's a longer journey than simply stopping the behavior.
And it's a journey. It absolutely isn't, a switch gets flipped and all of a sudden, voila.
But I am not saying to the person that wants to leave their spouse to stay there. Because if you are hurting and you're feeling abused and there's a cycle and you don't see a solution, get the hell out.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. That is all the questions. Does anybody else have a question?
Well, what time is it?
It's
we got a few minutes left, so
we got 20. Yeah,
time for an announcement.
Yeah.
So a quick announcement. I haven't actually run treatment myself for about 6 years or so. I have trained treatment teams and trained people to do it, but Tammy has been bugging me. My whole team has been bugging me to actually get in there and work with you guys. So I'm going to do a 2-week intensive here in California in April. And if you have any interest, it's for the addicts. And it is, if you have an interest, just reach out to Tammy and she'll let you know about it. We are finally in the process now that this is all set up and you guys have access to us, to opening some treatment programs. And I think the first one will be for men who are involved with chemsex problems, meth sex, coke sex, alcohol and sex, things that seem to fuse the two together. What I'm trying to do is to reach into the mental health and addiction world and pull out people who are underserved. And I believe that the combination of addiction problems or intimacy problems with addiction problems and drugs and alcohol often go together. And what gets talked about in treatment is the drugs and alcohol, not the intimacy, sex, relationship trauma piece. And even in sex addiction work, we often don't end up talking about the drugs and alcohol. So it really, for some people, requires that they look at both. And I'm trying to individuate and create programs that are really useful for people, not big ones, but ones that are specifically focused on their issues. By the way, if you feel like there's something in treatment that you think is under-addressed, you think there should be more couples workshops, you think there should be more weekend, let us know. We are in the process of putting together, for all intents and purposes, a world that includes the websites and includes treatment, and we are very open to learning what you want more of. So there's my little advertisement. And look, we got a question during my ad.
We do. So the first question is, do you have couples therapy via video conferencing? So you want to answer that one? Or?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. Therapists in the United States do not have something called portability. What that means is that I can practice psychotherapy online in the state of California where I live because I have a license here. But the United States has not yet allowed us to practice in other states. There's no federal licensing. So I cannot, if you're in Ohio or New York or San Francisco, I'm glad to refer you to the best couples therapists, and Tammy and I know lots of them. And actually, I'd rather you were in person with someone than sitting on a screen with me. But I can say that we're pulling together some workshops and programs, and we have people that we know who do great work in this area. Let us know, and we're glad to refer you.
And we will be offering some couples intensives, so different than couples therapy for the long haul, but a couples intensive. So again, you get on my radar with that.
Yeah, I think we'll end up doing probably 2, just to tell you, Tammy, but we'll probably do a couples in crisis thing where we start with couples who are just completely struggling at the very beginning, and then we'll probably do a longer term couples in recovery or couples in meaningful healing kind of weekend to be able to work at both ends of the spectrum. That's what I'm thinking about.
And all of that is needed, and prodependence intensives for partners. So we have a lot of things to do.
We do. We have a lot to do.
So here's a great question. Do SAs ever need to leave their spouse if their recovery is in danger or always more difficult?
I don't think so. I mean, I can't answer it. Look, if your spouse hits you in the middle of the night for no reason, if your spouse serves you poisoned food, if your spouse is trying to ruin your life actively, I suppose you might need to consider being elsewhere. But if your spouse is just angry or hurting, or, I mean, look, you need to do what you need to do for your recovery, but I think this particular issue is the kind of thing that might require you to figure out, let me say it this way. I bet Tammy already has a better answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. Life's difficult. You're always going to have difficult circumstances. You're going to go into a job you don't like. Your father's going to die. Something's going to happen. You're going to have a kid that drives you crazy. Life happens. And if you're living with someone who is leaving you feeling like you want to act out, I think it is better to figure out what's going on there and work through it than run away from that person. You may, in the end, decide you don't want to remain with that person. Well, that's fine. That's a different issue. But your desire to act out is getting triggered by something that's, in fact, this person may have a lot to teach you. For me to learn that, oh, it's abandonment, or, oh, it's someone's rage, or, what the things are that trigger me to want to act out, it's usually some emotional connection or disconnection. What better place to learn about that than in your relationship? I just wonder how much you're reaching outside the relationship every time you feel triggered. Because if it were me, every time I had some disagreement with my spouse and I felt triggered, I would immediately call the person in my program and I'd say, my sponsor or a therapist, to say, here I am again. In other words, I want to try to figure out what's going on, but not run away from it. Tammy, but I want you to advise.
No, I really like that answer. And I also think it's looking for those patterns, because, what is happening, you talked about that you shared that you've struggled with abandonment all your life. So anything that taps into that, you understand and recognize as a trigger. But you can then go, oh, I'm feeling abandoned and and no, I don't want to act out. So you can overcome that, but you have to learn what that really means for you. And I've shared this before with me too. It's like, I would have an anger issue, but I learned it was hurt, and I didn't like being hurt, and I would rather be angry. And that was a thing for me. And I had to learn to be okay with being hurt. I had to be able to identify it and learn to be okay, and then work through all of that. So all of these, like Dr. Rob was saying, it's an opportunity for growth. And that took years. That wasn't like in the first few months of recovery or whatever. All of this is a process, and peeling back the onion. Next question. My SA husband likes to smoke marijuana after drinking a couple of vodkas. Then if we have sex together, it becomes very intense interlude for him. In listening to your explanations about sex addiction issues, I have learned that the intensity is a way to recreate the experience of the thrill of porn.
Or disappear. Just disappear.
I often feel uncomfortable and used, really, because I think I am a stand-in for what he loves about porn. He has asked me to do things that I know he learned from watching porn, and it compounds my insecurities. I have tried to talk to him about this, but it falls on deaf ears. What do you think? Is he still active in his addiction, or is this way of having sex a substitute for it?
Did the person say that he was in recovery, or someone's in recovery?
It says my SA husband likes to smoke and drink marijuana. Yeah. So, but it doesn't say necessarily that he's.
It's all good. Yeah. Because if you say your SA husband, I mean, I'm going to assume that means that he's identified that he has a sex addiction problem and that he is in some way working on it. Because the first step to answer your question is to raise his awareness. So if he's an SA or in an S program, it's easier in a way, because you can say, honey, you can sit him down and say, sweetheart, I've learned a lot about your addiction and what you were doing. And, I have to say, when we have sex, I don't think you're here, and I don't feel like I matter. And part of it is you're stoned out of your mind half the time we have sex. The other part is I have a feeling that I end up in the same place in your head that porn does. And that's not okay with me. And so the first step to that changing is I don't want to have sex with you unless you're sober. And if he gets, I would really take a look at how often he's drinking and using, because we are notorious for having co-occurring addictions. Some of us put down the sex and we start eating, and then we gain 50 pounds. Some of us put down the sex and we double up on our drinking and pot smoking. All of a sudden we're just, we have all kinds of ways that we try to relieve the pressure of what's going inside of us. And so I don't think that someone is in active sex addiction recovery should be drinking and using before sex. Because forget your discomfort. I mean, that's an essential reason, but how about he learns about intimacy, connection, arousal? He's not learning anything. He's just getting off. And I have to say that one of the things we struggle with most, we sex addicts, is intimate relating when we're lying in bed with you and we just want to go there. We want to go anywhere, but we want to watch TV. We want to check, we are not fully aroused. And so sex is a little scary. Connection is a little scary. I bet you at those moments, when if he were sober, he might distance or run or go inside, or the alcohol and the drugs allow him to carry through in the sexual experience without anything uncomfortable coming up for him. My guess is if he stopped the drinking and using, you probably wouldn't have much of a sex life because he'd have to look at the stuff underneath. And there's probably issues there that are difficult. So I think you have every reason, and it's essential actually, for you to say to this man, I do not want to be sexual with you anymore when you're not sober. And let me say something to all the spouses in the room, because I think this is always something important to say. There is nothing that any spouse in this room can do to make us act out. If I'm an alcoholic, you can yell at me, you can shame me, you can blame me, you can leave me, you can have sex with other people and have an affair. I might be pretty upset, but I can never say that's the reason that I drank. If I go back to drinking as an alcoholic, it's because that's what I wanted to do. And you gave me an excuse to go do what I wanted. And it's the same with sex addiction. If this man wants to keep acting out, if this is what he does, this is what he's going to do. And yeah, kind of like that. Sorry, I lost my point, but I'm there.
It's all good.
Go ahead, finish.
I think next question. I gave a testimony at a small Christian group meeting recently and disclosed that I am recovering from addiction. The following week, someone asked me what type of addiction. I refused to disclose, and it felt it was an intrusive question. Am I justified in feeling this way? How would you recommend approaching questions or coming out of the closet?
I'd probably say something like, I really appreciate your asking about it, but it's really personal for me and I'm still figuring it all out. And, when I'm ready to talk about it, I will. I think that you can not be defensive. And it also depends on the group, the problem sometimes with church groups is everybody knows your neighbor, everybody knows your sister, everybody knows the pastor, and they talk. And so if you don't feel safe in that environment, you shouldn't talk about it. It's fine to say you have an addiction. Lord knows half the world does these days, but I wouldn't get into the details, especially around intimacy and sex, because once you get branded as having that kind of a problem, you never know when you might be walking into church and someone turns their head to look at you and they're really looking at your orange shirt, but you think they're looking at you because everybody in the church thinks you're a sex offender because, I would be very cautious with what you say and where. It's great to know your truth. It's not such a great idea to tell everyone in the world. We have boundaries for a reason. The people closest to us need to know pretty much everything. The people on that ring around that, they might need to know we've struggled with a little depression or a little anxiety, or we're working on some issues. They don't necessarily need to know what. And the people outside of that may need to just know we need a week off, or we need to be off on Thursday nights. That's it. So I would not feel badly about it. I probably would have felt a little defensive too. And I think you can correct it by just saying, hey, by disarming them, by saying, I'm just really working on this. I'm still figuring it out. And, I just really appreciate your asking. And as soon as I figure it out, I'll let you know. What else are they going to say?
I have one more thought. The former president of ASAM, which is the American Society of Addiction Medicine, I was in a meeting at one point with him, and he said, there is no S in addiction. Addiction is addiction. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. And so, something like that, where it's just like, it doesn't matter how the behavior displays
Manifests.
itself. Yes, manifests is the right word. Thank you. It's just, it's just how it affects me. So, and then, go on with the conversation. But I totally agree that we get to have our truth. With the people on our inner circle, yes, I need to know, but not everybody needs to know everything.
And also this whole thing about give me a break, and I've been working on it, and when is it going to be? When are you going to celebrate me? And I'm tired of you being angry, and just tell them to shut up. Sorry, tell them to read out of the doghouse. Really, you have a right to be angry, and don't ever, spouses, let someone say to you, if you keep nagging me, well, I'm just going to have sex with someone else. That's incredibly abusive and not true.
Okay, so final question for the evening. I find myself getting triggered by my SA husband's FASTT check-in whenever he tells me about a new threat. It has been 1 year since discovery, and I find it painful to hear that he still has lust hits while out in public. Is there a good way for him to rebuild trust without triggering me? Or is that my job? I
No.
appreciate that he is opening up to me, so I don't want to shut down the conversation.
Okay, so they say that men think about sex every 3 seconds. I would say, as a man, maybe every five. Kidding, maybe, but certainly, I guarantee you, as a man, whether I'm 20 or 70, if somebody attractive walks by, I'm going to think about them sexually. I'm going to objectify them a little bit. I'm going to think a little bit about what sex would be like with them, because I'm a man. It is very healthy to lust and have lust. It's not so healthy to act on it when you're in a relationship and you're going to lie to your spouse. So, but finding people attractive in the world. So, but do you need to know? I mean, think about it. If he didn't have any of these issues at all, how would you feel if your man came home to you every 3 days and said, oh, I saw this really hot babe and she looked like this, and it wouldn't be good for your marriage? My belief is that you as a partner absolutely need to know if we have compromised our relationship in our behavior. If I have made an appointment to go see a prostitute and I put money down, if I have had sex with somebody, if these are things I need to talk about. But looked at someone, felt attracted to someone, felt lustful today, that's human. And we wouldn't say it ordinarily to any partner because it's just what's going on inside of us. I think sex addicts feel like, oh, I have to tell him or her everything because I have to be completely honest, and you don't need to know everything. And I know you're going to maybe object to this and say, no, I'd rather know. You're telling me that you'd rather not. And I'm telling you, it's better if you're not. Because, listen, I bet you have found a few people attractive too in the last couple of years. Have you told your husband that the doctor you've been going through regularly you find attractive, or the person at the grocery store? No, because you don't think about it more than, oh, that person's attractive, and then it's out of your mind. My guess is, if you're healthy. But it really isn't something that he is required to bring to you. What is required is that his sobriety date, anything that he does that might change that, any significant behavior that he's gotten caught up in, that means you're going to have to say what you're starting all over again, that's a discussion you need to have. But looking, fantasizing what goes on in his head is his business. And if he wants to bring it to a sponsor or someone in his 12-step program or a therapist, that's great. He shouldn't be bringing it to you. There is a boundary and a limit around what we share with partners, and he's crossing it.
Great answer. So that wraps it up for this evening. So thank
Friday
you,
night on In the
Rob.
Rooms, Friday night, 6 o'clock?
Yes, 6 o'clock Pacific time. And you do have to register on In the Rooms. So it's you go to their website and you do have to register to join those meetings. But there are a number of meetings, including AA, 12-step, and open groups and things like that too. So.
And the reason I mention the rooms is because we have 120 people in there on Friday nights, or 110. And so the questions are different. It's just a different environment, lots of different kinds of questions. And, you're always, but do stop in the groups and come visit us. And, we're just so glad for you. We wouldn't be doing this if you weren't here, and you wouldn't be here if we weren't doing this. So it all works out. What a codependent relationship. You guys, thank you.
Go. Thank you.
Tammy, thank you for your help.
Thank you, Dr. Rob. Bye.
Bye, everybody.